This afternoon I'm going to do quite a simple painting using just a couple of colours and based on sort of misty sunset scenes which involve a lake, some water, a bit of middle ground, a bit of mist, and some trees or branches with a large amount of contrast between the trees and the background. So it'll be a nice warm picture. I've got the picture roughly drawn out. I've just got a few marked areas where I'm going to have the middle ground, the foreground, the main trunks in the picture. I haven't bothered putting in too much detail. I haven't bothered putting in all the branches and so on. That'll be drawn in with a brush later on. Where there is a sun that you can see poking through the trees there, what I have done is just applied a disc of masking fluid at that point there, but I've not put it on anywhere else at all. Colours, as I say, we're going to use some simple colours. You could use, for your yellow, you could use lemon yellow followed by cad yellow, and then to make that oranger and redder you can use cad red, and then for the trees and so forth you can use burnt umber. And those are colours that you'll find in any watercolour paint set. I'm going to use similar colours, but not the sort of colours you'd get from a paint set. So I'm going to, a lot of my yellow is going to be new Gamboge, Winsor Newton colour, followed by a little bit of Indian yellow, and then also enriched by some Quinaccridone gold, which is a Daniel Smith colour. I'm using burnt umber, as I mentioned, that's a Winsor Newton, and I may use some Quinaccridone sienna, which is another Daniel Smith colour. This is very similar to burnt sienna, which I love, but which is perhaps just a little bit redder. But I'll see how the painting goes with those. The drawing is done, as I say, on Arches 300 gram rough watercolour paper. This is lovely paper to use, and you can get all sorts of lovely sparkly effects with it and so on. It will take a lot of punishment and a lot of water wash, so it's a favourite paper of mine. I've stretched the paper, pre-stretched it, using the simple quick stretching technique which I mentioned in one of my other YouTube videos. Now it's essential for this sort of painting. This is where I find a lot of fairly new watercolourists make the mistake. It's essential to use a large brush for the washes. I often find watercolour artists sometimes try to apply large washes with just a medium-sized brush, and that's a mistake. You want to make sure you've got a nice big brush. I shall also be using a rigger and a brush between the two, between the large and the rigger. So the first thing you want to do is to make up nice large washes of some of your colours. So on the left hand side here I've got my new Gamboge, followed by the Indian yellow, and in my palette, which you probably can't see, just move that across, I've got some of the Quinaccridone gold. First job is to wet the entire paper. Now how much water you put on, how damp you make it, really comes down to the temperature of the room you're working in, humidity and so forth. I just want to get it wet or damp. I don't want it to be too wet. If I get so much water on that it's shiny overall, then I'll probably just leave it for a minute. That looks about alright. fine. Okay, so now time to put on the initial washes. Starting off with a new Gamboge, I'm going to leave around where the sun area is, I'm going to leave that almost completely white. So I'm just going to drop in new Gamboge. I'm going to leave a little bit of white on the water there too. I want it sort of fairly streaky. Just leave a little bit of white on the water. Difficult to see where the water is at the moment, but it'll come clear as we move on. That's okay. Just strengthen that up a little bit as the water starts to dry. So this is still new Gamboge, but just a little bit stickier. I want this streaky effect, so just dropping in. There we go. You get to a point with whatever colour you're using where you can't make it any darker or heavier in tone or value. At that point there's no point trying to put anything more in, you just need to stop or go for a different colour. A little bit too streaky there, just blend that in a little bit. That's okay, good. Wash the brush and then pick up my next colour, which for me is the Indian yellow. Lovely colour that. I prefer it to using an orange, a cad orange, which I can often find is just a little bit too opaque. But if cad orange is all you've got, then there's no reason why you shouldn't use that. Okay, clean the brush again, pick up some of my Quinaccridone gold. There, look at that, that's really quite rich. Nice Daniel Smith colour. Here, put it into the sky as well. Where I'm putting it is really up to me. Yes, I'm using the photographs as a bit of a guide, but I'm not following them too closely. I'm trying at the end of the day, as I do with most of my painting work, to capture the light. So I've got some light coming there with the sun, and on the water too. Now this has been going a little bit fuzzy. I don't want that, so I take a medium-sized dry brush and just knock that fuzziness off there. That's fine, good. And where I do want it to be fuzzy, it hasn't gone fuzzy, so let's just it's better. I want contrast there near where the sun is. Now I'm using, let's say, this Quinaccridone gold. You could use burnt sienna for that. Okay. So now I'm just going to use a slightly smaller brush and start on some of the foreground areas, middle ground areas, with some burnt umber. Remember, at the moment all we're doing is getting on some of our background washes. We're not putting any detail work in at the moment. It's really quite abstract. Right, I'm going to allow that to dry. So there we have the basis for our painting. You might ask why it is that I've used some masking fluid on the sun area there when it's all white around it anyway, but I want the tree to go in front of the sun, so that's why I've masked that off a little bit. And also I'm going to put a few more middle distance trees in that area anyway. So to start off with, I'm going to work from the middle distance, work my way forward into the foreground, just putting in areas, misty areas of trees. I've lost a little bit of light where I had actually wanted it down here, but that's okay, we can get some of that back with contrast. So I'm going to use some of this Quinaccridone gold plus a little bit of burnt umber and just start to establish some areas of sort of ill-defined, slightly misty trees. Change the tone here and there, add a little bit of water. Starting to build that up quite nicely. Add a little bit of burnt umber to the mix, just to change the colour. And use the brush to just soften some of the areas too, with water. My foreground trees will go through these areas, but because the foreground trees are going to be darker, I don't have to worry about that at the moment. The dark will go over the lighter areas. Just going to use a rigger just to tease out Okay, so that's the middle distance going. I shall carry on do that, and then come forward a little bit into this bank area halfway down. Just wanted to show you how we're doing this middle distance, and how you can just use your imagination to create little areas. What I've done here, I've got a sort of a mud bank coming from the left there, this bank coming from the right. In the distance there's another bank, but much lower in tone, with a bit of clear water between the two, trees and so forth. And the way to create some of these misty areas is to just use some fresh water, like so, and then using whatever colour you're doing it with. This again is the Quinaccridone Gold. Just apply it above the fresh water you put down, which means the area below it will go nice and misty. And you get this lovely, lovely soft effect where the mist comes in, it gets caught between layers of ground and so forth. So I'll finish off this right hand side with another area of much the same. So just apply a little bit of water, and because we're coming a little bit closer to the eye, I'm mixing the Quinaccridone Gold with a little bit of burnt umber, making it slightly richer, slightly darker. That's better. Little tufts of grass. And if you're going to have areas where you've got sort of headlands or furrows or whatever, don't have them all the same parallel to each other. Have some of them touching. There we go. Makes the whole thing much, much more interesting. This area over here, I think, just needs something to sort itself out. There we go. So that's another. Closer to the eye, so it's darker, it's richer. Good. And I'll do something on the other side just to... Now a lot of this is going to be covered with trunks and trees and so forth anyway, but just balance that out with a little bit more on the side. Okay, and I'll keep on working forward. As you can see, beginning now to finish the middle ground, doing a little bit of work on the foreground. It's going to be tonally richer and warmer, so using almost pure burnt umber on this. The arch paper is rough, and you can see that if I take my brush with a fairly dry mix of burnt umber on it and drag it across on its side like that, we get these lovely sparkly effects where the brush does not go down into the little hollows of the roughness, if you like, and that's quite effective, that's quite nice. Gives you a bit of texture. The temptation is to add colour, more different colours to this, putting in a bit of blue perhaps. I could do that, but you've got to be careful. It's very, very easy to make a painting look dirty, because you end up with a brown and the blue. You can end up with a very dark, muddy grey colour, which is not very nice. and that can tend to shut the entire painting down. Now I'm going to put some bushy effects into this. So all I'm doing here is producing a base, a bit of a base for some reeds and things like that a little bit later on. So this is not looking exactly how it will end up in the finished painting. Too thick there perhaps. You can see that I've done a little bit of work on the reeds down here. I'll do more of that a little later on because they need to be a bit darker perhaps. And I've started to establish where some of the main branches and trunks are going to be. I've got some coming in from left and from right. You want these to cross over. I'm just establishing where they are at the moment rather than putting any detail in. I'm using the Quinaccridone gold, as I say, and now I'm going to go in with the burnt umber. I'll just do one or two to get you going, and then so you can see how I do it. Again, you want to change the tone, adding more or less water. Tend to use a lot of paint directly from the tube as well, so I can get maximum tonal contrast. Just tease some of those out. Just thicken that up a little bit. And remember, trunks, branches and so forth, depending on the species of tree I suppose, they're gnarled, they're angular, they're not lovely feminine, what I call feminine shapes. They are quite awkward very often, but overall produce a lovely when taken all together, all the branches together, produce a lovely, lovely shape. So what I can do now is change to a rigger brush. Start to put in some finer work. And you could go on doing this forever. I mean, depends entirely upon how far you want to go. But the idea is to work from the bottom of the branch or from the trunk outwards, lifting the brush off, so you get these lovely feathery shapes. And where you've got the lovely light areas that you've left in your initial washes, you get this lovely feeling of contrast. Now, because some of the branches are going away from you, some are slightly distant, then you want to have some of them quite light, maybe a little bit water. You don't want to be all the same tone. I've nearly finished the left-hand tree there. I might do a little bit more to that later on. I've just started to establish this right-hand tree just to show you that I wanted it to go in front of the sun area there. And just establishing now some of these branches coming off. You've got to sort of develop a bit of a tremor when you do this. The last thing you want is nice straight branches. And they can stop and start, they don't have to all be continuous. And I find that the rough archer's paper helps. That's beginning to come now. I wanted the tree and some of the branches to go across the lighter area of the sky, just so that we get that lovely contrast. And you find that if you want to make your light areas, your white areas if you like, to become lighter and whiter, then you simply put a dark beside them or through them. And it has the effect of making those light areas look even lighter. It's just I suppose an illusion or whatever, but it's quite effective. If you want to know how, or one of the ways in which you can help yourself to sell paintings at an exhibition or whatever, someone said to me once that you want to have your painting, even if it's the back of the hall, catch the eye of the people as they come into the exhibition hall and hold their attention as they walk towards it. And the way to do that very often is by tone, by using contrast. So having a painting which has got a lot of contrast, very light areas, very dark areas beside them. If you go into a portrait gallery, go into the National Portrait Gallery, some of the old paintings, Van Dyck's and so forth, the backgrounds of these portraits are incredibly dark, black. But the light that captures on the subject's face is just incredible. And you can use that not just for portrait painting, but all your painting. That contrast. People say, why do your paintings sometimes look so fresh and so forth? It's because I'm capturing the light. I'm putting these darks across that light area there, I feel anyway. The light is made even lighter. So, I'll carry on doing that. So, we're nearly finished now. You'll see that I have taken the masking fluid off and left that little bit there sort of slightly blurred where the sort of sun's coming through. It hasn't quite worked out as I'd hoped, but to make that stand out a little bit further, that sun coming through, you need to put a little bit more dark around it perhaps, or a little bit of bit more of the burnt sienna. But anyway, that's okay. just to finish off now, I'm going to liven the painting up. At the moment it's fine, it's okay, it looks alright, but I'm just going to add a little bit of burnt umber splatter here and there. And by doing so, I find that this, you don't want to overdo it, but I find that it does add a little bit of life to the picture, fill some of the areas which are perhaps a little bit empty. If when you're doing this, there are areas you don't want to splatter, then you simply mask them off with a bit of paper. So that's the painting finished. As I said, I added a little bit of splatter just to give a little bit of life to the painting. The main thing to note is what you can achieve with just a few colours. So basically a yellow and a brown. In this case, I've extended them slightly. I've used new Gamboge, the Quinaccridone deep gold, and burnt umber. In capturing light, that's the essence of what we're trying to do here. Light in the water, light in the sky, by using contrast, the darker and deeper tones of colour. And if we just cover that now, or put a mount onto it, that gives us a good idea of what it'll look like when it's in a frame. Well, I've enjoyed doing that. I hope you've enjoyed watching. Thank you for watching, and I hope that just using simple techniques, wet into wet, and large washes applied with a big brush, I hope that you get good success with your own painting. Thank you.